Welcome to ACC's International Programs Global Issued Speaker Series, where different faculty present on relevant global topics from various areas. My name is Shuja Uddin, and I teach radio, television, film as an associate professor here at Austin Community College. My talk today is centered around global media and pop culture and how it can build bridges between American and international students. America is changing. In fact, America has changed, and you can feel the change. Now, as a kid growing up in Karachi, Pakistan, I always admired America, a country who I could understand through its popular culture that I consume more than the home culture of my country. It was the American dream, the American excess, the American exceptionalism. However, as a tourist visiting America in the post 9/11 years, it felt like a country that was suspicious, unsure about its identity and what was its relationship with the world. Now, fast forward to 2017, the year I landed in America to pursue my master's degree at the prestigious Boston University. At my orientation, I assumed that I was going to witness the culture shocks of America. Instead, what I ended up witnessing was a Chinese and Taiwanese student questioning each other on whether or not what was the politically correct way to refer to Taiwan. That's when I realized the American bubble had burst. The world's issues had arrived on American soil. To be precise, they had found their place in the American higher education campuses. So let's come back to today. Where do we find ourselves today? Today, we find ourselves in a growing multipolar world where foreign nations challenge American dominance, the rise of BRICS nations, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the realignment in the Middle East and Europe. But yet there is no competitor that can rival American universities and colleges, and that's where our work begins, bridging the gap between American and international students to ensure a harmonious social cohesion. Not only that, I aim to serve the best interest of American students, and what better than to develop the next generation of globalized Americans. And the best way to do that is to embrace the global language that we share, the language of pop culture. So here's the situation. This is me in the 90s. As a kid growing up in Pakistan. And in 1998, I know that some of you might be like, oh, this guy is young. In 1998, I had the chance to visit America. And in 1998, we visited Disneyland, where you can see me lovingly, that's my sister beside me, lovingly looking at Goofy. And that's where sort of my perception of the United States was, as this sort of loving, amazing space that I wanted to be at. And just Disneyland, as any kid, will always have those qualities within that. And so growing up, watching Batman, playing with action figures like Spider-Man and all kinds of things that were just part of America. I mean, I grew up watching Batman movies in the 90s, watching X-Men and Spider-Man and the Batman animated series. That just kind of gives you a glimpse into, as a kid growing up in the global south, in Pakistan, that the American pop culture was just part and parcel of my life. I remember in 1998 or onwards, we had McDonald's come to Pakistan for the first time. And then when it came, it just was this frenzy that took over my country, because we had just admired and heard so much about McDonald's that when we went there, it was just an amazing experience. Now, granted, people don't love McDonald's as much as they used to, particularly in the United States, but that was a window of Americanization coming into the global south, and we had this positive experience. So going back to what I said, I grew up not in America, but I grew up on America, and that was some of the things that defined my childhood and so many other people and all across the world, particularly in the 90s. And so when I came to America in the 2017s, being in Boston University, I just had this amazing experience to really witness an American culture, and particularly in the Northeast, in the New England and Boston, to learn about sort of the American values, the liberal values, and what defined the American higher education campuses. That's what really made my experience in the United States such a pleasant experience, to see the warmth and hospitality and the openness. The key word being the openness of what defined the American experience. And so that's what I really enjoyed when I was in Boston University, not only having this incredible access to education, but also to see the openness that defined America. So that leads me to the question, what is soft power? Soft power is a term that was coined by Joseph S. Nye Jr., who was the former dean of Harvard Kennedy School, and who I really admire. And his work on soft power was really important. And what I really want to talk about, before I go on talking about soft power, is what is hard power. Hard power is basically what we know in the world as military might. You know, your tanks, your soldiers, your military strength is basically what defines hard power. But what makes soft power really powerful is that it is the cultural products and the attitudes and the values and the worldview that can influence other countries, other nations, other peoples. And so Joseph S. Nye Jr. really felt that this was such an important part of American strength, that not only are we the most strongest military, particularly when he termed it in the 1980s, that not only are we the most strongest military at the time, but what really broke the Cold War and what really let the Iron Curtain to fall was our American cultural products and our American values that really changed the tide of history. So one of the ways that Joseph S. Nye Jr. and how he thought about soft power was from Hollywood to Harvard. These are the two pillars of American institutions that define America globally, and to people all over the world. Now, Hollywood being, of course, our movies, our, the stars, the culture, the music, all those things that define Hollywood, and like the Marvels of the world, the Fast and Furiouses of the world, all of these things that really travel globally and people know about our stars is because of the movies. The way they learn and understand about America is through Hollywood. American higher education campuses. Now, what Harvard is basically a symbol of is how it attracts global talent to the American soil, how international students come to our campuses, even in countries where they're adversarial towards America or American views or American politics. They all want their kids to come to America and to study in American higher education campuses. So Harvard may be the best example, but we have students coming from all across the world and going to all different kinds of universities and community colleges and educational institutions, because that is integral part of a soft power. So the question being, why amplifying American and international soft power on our community college campuses will help us navigate the new status quo. Some of the examples that we see of global soft power in America are K-pop. Okay, Korean content, Korean music, Korean TV shows, they are being admired and loved by American youth and from all walks of life in America that are just consuming. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a student last semester, they love Korea so much they named their dog Kimchi. That is the level that we're operating now, is the rise of Korean culture. And it's really important because South Korea has a PR problem. It's called North Korea. And so in order to create a goodwill amongst American audiences and American youth and American understanding, and also globally, is to use their soft power to combat against the hard power of North Korea. And so that's why we see such a huge prevalence of Korean content and Korean culture in the American society. Another example is reggaeton. Now, reggaeton as a music, it's become so popular all across the United States, particularly with Hispanic and Latin American communities all across the United States. That music has found so much space in the American society. We want to talk about why reggaeton has found such a space in the American society, because it's a soft power that has changed minds, that you can see in clubs and bars, and just every day today Americans are listening to reggaeton music and reggaeton stars like Bad Bunny. Now, Bad Bunny is such a huge star that people who don't even speak Spanish or are not Puerto Rican are still listening to his music, and he's having this major cultural impact, and so many other artists are doing that too. The next example is RRR. which is a South Indian movie. So now you can see global cinema is also permeating in the American society. I'll give you an example. I was teaching at a high school, and some of my students were like, hey, can we watch RRR? And I was like, that's a South Indian movie. How do you know about that? But it had found a place in the Americans. It became such a huge sensation that not only was it popular amongst American youth and Americans in general, that they even did the famous Natu dance at the Academy, just showing that global culture had found its place in the mainstream American institutions. So going on to the next slide, some recent examples that we see: the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. Now, Macy's Thanksgiving Parade is as American as it gets, right? And now we're seeing cartoon characters that are not American. Now we're seeing Goku, who I love Goku. I'm a huge Dragon Ball Z fan, but now we're seeing Goku and other anime characters that are part of the balloons, which kind of shows that we're not just now limited to the Spider-Mans and the SpongeBobs of the world, but rather the global culture has found its place in the American mind, in the American youth, in the American society. Another example is BTS, the famous Korean pop band, K-pop band, went to the White House to meet former President Joe Biden. I mean, that was a great experience to see a global pop culture institution being used to create soft power amongst the American society. So we saw them come to the White House and talk about some of the concerning things that was happening in the country at the time. And then recently we also saw Bad Bunny attend the Met Gala in 2020, thus giving more space to Spanish-speaking artists in American institutions. So this leads me to the question, community college is Americana? Community college is definitely Americana, because a successful community college like ACC attracts, invites, welcomes Americans from all walks of life to come and build a future for themselves. But not only that, now we're seeing more than ever international students coming to community college, and that's where there's a contact happening between American students and international students. This contact is happening where we need to think about how do we build an Americana, but at the same time we celebrate global culture. And those are some of the things, because we're going into a world that is changing. Not only the world is changing, but America is changing, as I said earlier. 1.12 million international students studied in America in 2023, 2024. This kind of shows you the breadth, the amount of internationalism is coming to the United States. How even after all that America is going through, I mean, after all the things that America is being questioned on and its global power is being questioned, we still are attracting so many international students that are not just here to study and to learn through our higher education campuses, but to even find work and to be part of the American society. So that kind of goes to show that we're still such a hotbed of international talent coming to our shores. But American isolationism, it's here. What does that mean? What it means is we are now as a country looking more towards inwards than to looking outwards, where other international crises are happening. Now, when Pearl Harbor happened, there were isolationists like Senator Arthur Vandenberg, who did not believe in globalist thought, who wanted to keep America isolationist. But when Pearl Harbor happened, the isolationism had ended. They could not be isolationists anymore. That the day ended isolationism for any realist. That was the day America opened itself, then became involved in World War II, and so on and so forth. So we as a country are finding ourselves that the world that we have is no more within the way we had shaped the world post 1945. The post 1945 world, which we shaped it was the United States and Soviet Union. That way the world we had shaped is now changing. We are seeing realignment happening in the Middle East, in Europe, and so many other parts of the world. As I mentioned earlier, the BRICS, the rise of so many global South countries trying to find dominance in this. So the world that America is seeing is no more an isolationist world. They have to address the changing tides in the world. And so while we are facing an isolationist approach, an average American is seeing that the world is becoming more and more globalized. And so here I want to quote Condoleezza Rice, she wrote in the Foreign Affairs magazine, and this is where she's talking about why is it important to have Russian students still come and study in the United States against all what's happening politically in that part of the world. And here I want to quote and read out what she wrote. It is incumbent upon the United States, Europe, and others to keep some connection to the Russian people. Russians should be allowed, when possible, to study and work abroad. Efforts, open and covert, should be made to pierce Putin's propaganda, particularly in the cities where he is neither trusted nor liked. What that means is it of national security importance that we create openness in our society so that we can combat against what our adversaries are thinking about us, to change their perceptions, to change their opinions. And so Foreign Affairs magazine, when Condoleezza Rice wrote about it, it definitely shows that we need to keep our campuses globalized, to keep our thoughts globalized, but at the same time doing it in the best interest of America and for a national security perspective. And so what are some of the things that we can do to create a globalized campus? Now, it's really important. What I'm going to point out here is that this is a delicate balance between celebrating American society and American culture while also celebrating global culture. So it's really, really important to create that social cohesion, okay? Because we don't want one or the other to overtake the other, which can alienate the other side. So what are some of the things that we can do? Globalized curriculum, study abroad exchanges. ACC International's program is doing all it can to create study abroad. We need more support. We need more funding to make it happen. But those are some of the things that are happening with the study abroad program. People-to-people exchange. I just came back from Senegal, a West African country, and I met some African folks in Austin who were part of the Nelson Mandela Fellowship Program. And I just happened to run into them at a business event, and just because we started talking, we started conversing, that it led me to go to Senegal and to explore their country, to see all the beauty that comes from there. So people-to-people exchanges are basically, are things that we need to think about, because those are the things that can build bridges and open American minds to globalized perspectives, to see what other countries are facing and to understand our positioning in this world. Amplifying American values. Really important that we're amplifying American values, because those are the things that constantly attract people to our countries. The openness, the freedom of speech, sort of our liberal values that define us. And that's something, some of the ways that is being defined is through movies, through Hollywood movies, through independent cinema, through music. I mean, Brad Summer, come on guys. Did y'all not know about Brad Summer? That was a huge thing, global phenomenon. Food, our American food, like burgers, come on. Like those are things that have gone on to define what America is. And that's the space. Food is where American cuisine is becoming more globalized. As you can see that we're getting all these fusion food all over the country, and particularly from immigrant communities, and how they're building it to make American cuisine much more deeper and much more layered, and it's just making a lot of Americans happy. So the food is basically something that we are actually very globalized. We want to continue to do that, invite. And then, as I said, the worldview, the Western worldview that we have is something that, makes us strong. Those are things that have been part of what has attracted other people. Think about the Soviet Union. Think about in the Eastern Bloc, and how our openness was something that really attracted so many people, and how led to the downfall of the Soviet Union. And so here are some of the things, as you can see on the screen, that I'm doing to create a globalized campus. One example, as you can see here on the bottom left, is I invited Professor Benjamin Brower from UT Austin Middle Eastern Studies program to talk about the movie Battle of Algiers and the history of French colonization in Algeria. And so it was a riveting talk to understand about how other countries had gone through periods of colonization and what were some of this resistance struggle, but also understanding how a cinema, a film like Battle of Algiers was such a transformative film for a whole country to build a nation. I mean, he gave us such a great example of how many soccer stars, before they go on to play, soccer that they watch some scenes from the movie to get themselves hyped up. This is the power of national unity that can be created through the film. On the top right, you can see an example of students of a speaker from Mexico, a Mexican filmmaker who shared about his experiences making films in Mexico and what are some of the challenges and what the world wants to see from Mexico. So Luis Sosa was such a great guest who attended our class, and students were really loved his talk, and how some of the students even commented who were Mexican American descent that now I want to make a movie. So just there's a ways of building bridges. In the bottom right, you can see we had a Chinese filmmaker, critical Chinese filmmaker Leon Lee, talk about his film and just talking about his experiences making films in China and some of the hurdles with censorship and just making politically sensitive content, and how can that lead into problematic spaces. So it was such an important eye-opening experience for students to understand is how, you know, making films in other countries can have so many consequences and challenges. And in the center, I invited two speakers who were originally from Pakistan, Bina Sarwar and Sana Haroon, Dr. Sana Haroon, who talked about the film Mississippi Masala and the South Asian migration. And this was an amazing collaboration with UT Austin South Asia Institute. Such an amazing experience between collaboration between two different institutions, but also to opening the ACC student to other experiences. And then again, we use the power of cinema to build that graph. And finally, on the top left, we invited a chaplain, Bobby Hooper, to come to class, and he served in the military, and he talked about. And just to give you some context, that class had 90% were veterans in that class. And so it was really important for students to hear from Bobby and how he used storytelling as a way of healing, but also celebrating American pride and bringing people together. Some of the films that I show in class, some examples as you can see on the slide, is Battle of Algiers from Algeria. Which is a film from South Korea. China opened the bubble sort of beyond just the K-pop and the Korean content, but to show some critical cinema, particularly Park Chan-wook and his inspirations from American cinema like Quentin Tarantino cinema, Pather Panchali, independent Indian films, and not just we're looking at Bollywood, but rather we're looking at independent filmmakers and how they're defining Indian cinema, particularly Satyajit Ray's contributions to it. And then Joyland, which is a film from my home country of Pakistan, and how this film centered trans experiences, which is usually what you don't hear from that part of the world, but this film was such an inspirational film, and a lot of students really gravitated towards that. Some ways to build those bridges and to bring people together. Some of the local things that we try to do is we took some, if you see in the bottom right, we took some students to a local South Asian festival, film festival, Indie Meme Film Festival. We also showed students a film called Democracy in Debt, which is a documentary about the democratic process in Sri Lanka and how it's being challenged. We had a local filmmaker, Nigerian-American filmmaker, talk about their film and their film screening, and students attended that. And then we also took students to Vila Video, which is a local video store, and some of the Mexican-American students had an amazing experience watching films from their childhood, like De Sangre Mexicana 2. So it was such a great experience. Finally, to conclude it all, Condoleezza Rice said recently in the Foreign Affairs magazine, isolation has never been the answer to the United States' security or prosperity. We can't be isolationist. We are at a crossroads in this country where America's global role is being questioned. Yet we know the world believes in America because every day we see the best and the brightest come through the hallowed corridors of the American higher education. And what we do here at ACC makes community college so significant because they are the flashpoint of American society, because whoever comes to us has a chance of attending a 4-year prestigious college or to reinvigorate the American workforce, which in turn reinvigorates the American society. So it is pertinent now more than ever as we face challenges abroad and at home that we develop globally minded American citizens that can lead America into the future. A new chapter has dawned upon the United States of America, and with that, this is a time to step up, not step back. Thank you for joining ACC's International Programs Global Issues Speaker Series. Again, my name is Shuja Uddin, and I'm an RTF Associate Professor at the Austin Community College. To learn more about programs in this area, visit austincc.edu. Thank you.